Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, like, I had stopped at some major city. I think it was probably Dallas, since that's closer. I stopped at like what it said on my GPS was a PI's office, but when I pulled up, it was like gated, and I didn't see a way in, and I was just like, let me go. At that point, I didn't realize I was being followed, or I hadn't taken notice. But once I got on the highway, that's when I took notice. The fact that both these red vehicles had been behind me or around me, you know, they keep a distance so that there's plausible deniability, but they had been in my vicinity moving with me for over 3 hours. Stopped at the gas station. The guy stopped as well. And then I took the frontage road, and he followed me down the frontage road as well. So just in case there was any question, right? I was confirming for myself that I was definitely followed, and he took the bait. Which in this case was good, because I was still new to this whole being followed thing. And you got to understand that I'm even having to confirm and double confirm for myself that that's what's going on here. So as soon as I deduced that they were definitely both following me, I was like, okay, I need to go to the police right now, because I've already left the town. I've already taken measures to leave this town for good, and I'm still being followed to my next move. This is not going to stop. Sorry, I'm crossing the street here. So I was like, this is not going to stop. Like, I need to urgently go to the police right now. So I stopped in the nearest town. I was scared, you know what I mean? Like, now there's two, especially the fact that there was 2 vehicles following me, and thinking about how long of a drive it is from Stanford to Salt Lake City. It's long enough that there's going to be nighttime driving involved. So I'm like, okay, I know I can't just let this, I have to report the fact that I'm being followed. Looked up the closest police station, because again, at this point, I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know why they're following me. Really, for all I knew, my life was in danger. That's truly how I felt at that time, because I've never been followed like this. Yeah, like, I've never been followed, really, period, this closely as far as a vehicle specifically following me. And definitely not this much. I stopped at the Corsicana Police Department, hoping that me stopping at a police station would at least get them to stop following me for the time being. And I walked in, I told the front desk, the woman working at the front desk of the Corsicana Police Department, I said, I need to report a rape. And I'm being followed. So she told me to wait in the waiting area, which I did. Oh my God. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm still having to pay attention to my surroundings. So I waited in the waiting area. As I waited in the waiting area, I said, okay, I already know that there's a huge chance that they have someone on the Stanford Police Department, but at this point I have to call the Stanford Police Department to report what I know. So I called while I'm in the waiting area to give my statement to the Corsicana Police Department. I called and I said, I need to report a rape. I've been stalked and raped. I think all I said was I need to report a rape on the phone to the dispatcher. Another important detail that I said to the dispatcher is there's a young police officer I didn't know his name, and I had already forgotten his name, which sucks. I have a lot more background to give on him as well. He's a good officer, and I knew I could trust him because I had already been in contact with him 2 different times. And one of the times was actually literally the night of April 17th. Was it April 17th or was it earlier? I'm sorry. It might not have been April 17th. It might have been a few days before that. But I was in Stamford and I found a cat in the middle of the road. And the cat was not dead, but it was like incapacitated and couldn't move. So I had called the police and like they came and helped me move the cat out of the road. I didn't want to move the cat out of the road myself. And they were really cool. And the young, I believe he's native, officer had been the one to like move the cat himself and be really helpful and like knock on the doors to try to figure out whose cat it was. I knew he was a good person and I knew I could trust him, which is why I asked for him on the phone. Because again, I'm already thinking, okay, I know Gil is friends with a lot of the police officers in town, so who can I trust? Trying to think one step ahead of the inevitable corruption. So as I'm on the phone that Sunday talking to dispatch, I asked for him, even though I didn't know his name. And she said, oh, well, the only person who can take a statement who's working today is Captain something or other. Unfortunately, this was all so much at one time, being stalked and all this other stuff, that I did not get his name. And I really hate that. But I know it was Captain something. Okay, so then she's like, it's Captain such and such, and he's gonna call you right back. I was like, okay. So then I get a call from no caller ID. Come to find the whole no caller ID thing is normal when police are calling you back, any police. So that's not significant at all. The fact that it was no caller ID is not significant at all. Apparently that's what all police do. Okay, but when he called back, he said, this is Captain such and such with the Stamford Police Department. Where are you right now? And I said, I'm at the Corsicana Police Department. I've been followed and I was raped. He said, let me talk with him right now. I'm pretty sure I had already told dispatch I've been followed and I'm at the Corsicana Police Department. I'm sorry, y'all. A lot of these details, it's hard because it's so much. It's hard because it's so much. So it's hard for me to remember certain details, but so he already knew that I was at another police station when he called. That's important. He was like, let me talk to him right now. Put him on the phone. Well, of course, this is an officer telling me what to do, so I do it. And the Corsicana police officer had just walked out about to take my statement. So he had just walked into the lobby. We hadn't gone into the interview room yet. So I gave him the phone. I didn't hear what was said over the phone. It wasn't on speaker. He spoke to the Stamford captain, spoke to the Corsicana police officer for probably about 2 minutes. And then he handed the phone back to me. I took the phone back and said to the Stamford police officer on my phone, I said, yeah, so I need to report the rape. Can I give you my statement right now? Something to that effect. And he said, I'll have to call you back. I might have called back again after I left Corsicana. I don't know. He said, I'll have to call you back. Well, needless to say, no one ever called me back. So that's extremely important. Refusal to take a statement. Refusal to take a report of a rape. Once I get in the interview room with the Corsicana officer, started telling him what I knew, And pretty early on, he was like, can you get to the point where a crime was committed? And I was like, they raped me, that's a crime. They're stalking me right now, that's a crime. They stalked me up till I got here, literally. Other significant things that officer said to me were, he said to me, well, he wants to make sure, that captain wants to make sure that you didn't, he wants to find out if you already told this to that other officer you were asking for on the phone. And I said no. Another significant part of that whole thing was that he said, when I was telling him what happened, it was not a long statement at all. We didn't talk for more than 15 minutes in that Corsicana interview room. He said, have you ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia? I was like, what? No. So like that officer had already been turned against me by the Stanford police officer, clearly, right? The piece about him confirming that I had not already told another police officer in Stanford is important, because what can I deduce from it? Well, we know that whatever captain, whatever his name is, I really wish I had his name, whatever captain spoke to the Corsicana officer on my phone is dirty, was already either told or blackmailed or bribed to not only not take my statement of a crime, but to also spread a lie about me, confirm what I know, spread a lie about me that I'm mentally ill, clearly. Now, the mentally ill piece, the mentally ill slander lie, that part's important because what it told me was that I didn't take it personally. As soon as he said that, I knew, okay, that's what these people are doing. Like, their whole plan, and I knew this as soon as he said that, even though it was still April 2023, their whole plan is go ahead and rape the victim. If the victim tries to report a crime, the next step is to falsely label her mentally ill. That's built into their whole thing here. That's why I didn't take it personally. I knew immediately that it was gaslighting, and that it was organized gaslighting. Again, we're talking about me having to deduce information, me having to deduce what's going on based on very little information. Well, of course, it also told me that my instinct, which was that young Native officer was a good person and a good police officer, had been correct. Because why else would that Stanford officer go out of his way to make sure that the Corsicana officer asked me about that? Because if he had, he was going to go and do some damage control. Because what that means is that they were already trying to contain me. When I say they, I mean this organized criminal syndicate. Well, you can only contain me if I'm talking to the person that was set up to take my talking to the officer that was set up to take my statement or lack thereof. So that tells you right there that I had already been plotted on, not only on behalf of this organized criminal syndicate who raped me and stalked me and all this other stuff, but that they had already covered their bases by being in contact with whoever's under their control at the police department. It sounded to me like this captain has authority there. So that tells you just how much control this organized criminal syndicate has over that town. And it also tells you that my instincts and what I had said to D&D, the people whose house I slept at, that I didn't want to report it to local police because it was already federal level stuff, but also because I knew that this was organized crime and that the likelihood that they had a police officer on their payroll was very high. That totally confirmed it. But, you know, obviously, I still did what I felt I had to do at the time, which was report it from the point of origin, especially because these two people had clearly followed me from Stanford. These two red cars. Another important detail from this day, really quick, before I go back to Corsicana Police Station, is that one of the red trucks that followed me was a red pickup truck, you know, where the back pulls down. And so at this point, so when that red truck followed me to that gas station and I pulled out and I already knew it was the same red truck because I had already taken his plates down. I had already taken his plates down, but I noticed that he had the thing pulled down. Like, he was driving. He followed me even up to the Corsicana police station. But when he passed by me as I was pulling into the police station, he had pulled the back of the pickup truck down at the gas station I had stopped at, but he had kept driving with it pulled down. And he did that so that I couldn't get his tags. So that tells you that at this point they already knew I was taking tags down. Maybe he saw me taking his tag down, or maybe he was trying to prevent me from getting his tags, but I had already gotten his tags and I still have them. And almost forgot. The Corsicana officer asked for the plate numbers of the people who had been following me. So of course I'm at a police station, I'm here to make a report. So of course I give it to him. Well, realizing that information was making it back to this syndicate via the Stanford officer, that means that both those tags numbers that I gave to the Corsicana officer made it back to the Stanford, so that, you know, they're trying to see what I know so they can cover their tracks, right? So that tells you they knew which tags I knew, because that's identifying information. You know, I've already got, unfortunately, little identifying information of this whole thing, but the identifying information I did have, well, it made its way back to the syndicate. What else? The Corsicana officer, I do not believe that he was affiliated with this syndicate. I want to make that clear. He was misled to be turned against me by another police officer, right? So of course, him being a police officer, he's going to listen to what a police officer says. And I also don't know exactly what that Stanford officer said to him. He clearly tried to paint me as crazy, but I don't know what else he said to him. As I'm walking away, I said to that officer, oh yeah, and the other important piece is that officer asked me where I was headed to. So I told him the truth. I said Salt Lake City. And he's like, well, I can't really do anything. It's broad daylight. This sounds like a federal. The very end. So the fact that I told him I was headed to Salt Lake City, that made its way back to the syndicate. Where I was headed to made its way back to the syndicate, which I put together very quickly. So he said, like, as I'm leaving, I'm like, sir, they're following me. Like, you know, it's a long drive to Salt Lake City. He's like, I know. He's like, look, it's broad daylight. They're not going to do anything. I said, I understand they're not going to do anything in broad daylight, but it's a long drive back to Salt Lake City. Like, at that point, I was worried they were going to try to shoot me down once it was dark outside, literally. Because I had never been through anything like this. Turns out they were probably following me because they didn't have a tracking device on my vehicle, and because they had already taken the tracking device off, and because they were trying to see where I was going to go to sleep again so they could break in, rape me in my sleep again. That's why they were still following me. But at that time, I didn't know that. For all I knew at that time, yeah, so I mean, that's whatever. Anyone being followed like this, especially by multiple vehicles at this point, you know, to me, the fact that it went from being followed by one person to being followed by 2 vehicles, to me, that was significant. That was significant enough for me to really feel my safety was at risk, and anyone in my position would feel the same way, is my point. Any normal person who's being stalked like this would feel the same way. So as soon as the last thing he said to me was, he was like, this is a federal case, you know, I think you need to go report this to the federal authorities. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I already knew that, you know. And then he was like, and I was like, sir, they raped me in my sleep. Like, he was like, I know, I've dealt with sexual assault victims before. Like, so my point about that whole thing being, that officer was clearly turned against me by another officer, not having previously been a part of this himself. So the other really important piece of this is that I've already had the advantage that a lot of their victims, at least in that town, don't have, being I went to an authority that they weren't expecting me preemptively to go to, right? Like Corsicana Police, that was a totally random place for me to stop. So like their efforts to contain me through Stanford Police were insufficient. Now, of course, I'm the one who called Stanford Police and gave them the chance to try to contain me by letting him speak to the Corsicana officer. But the way I saw it at the time, what was I going to do? Say no? Like on the phone with a police officer who says, let me speak to Corsicana Police right now, when I think he might take my statement? What was I going to do? Say no? Well, one second. So, yeah, like I had already had advantages that a lot of their victims don't have, in the sense of going to an authority they didn't expect me to go to. So there's that. That's significant because it means they're pulling out more resources than they pull out for most of their victims, right? Their efforts to contain me, it worked, unfortunately, in the case of that Corsicana police officer, but compared to a lot of their victims that don't have the resources that I have, I'm giving them a run for their money already at this point. And they know that based on the fact that they now know that I've gone to Corsicana Police. How do I know? Well, not only did the Corsicana officer be sure to ask me the things that Stanford Police clearly wanted him to ask me, namely the license plate numbers, if I had gone to the other Stanford Police about this, the other young Stanford Police officer, the native one, as well as where I was headed, because he had no other reason to ask where I was headed. Think about it. He made it a point to ask me where I was headed, and he was speaking down to me. But I say all that to say, I think he believed me about the rape. He just had been poisoned against me. And that's really important because it shows that even when this syndicate doesn't already have contacts within an authority or people they control within an authority, they use the authority that they do have of the people or police officers that they do control to turn other authorities who are innocent as far as being connected to organized crime against me. And that's really important throughout all this, right? Like, If that Corsicana officer had been already involved in whatever this is, I would have been able to tell. But I could tell that he wasn't, and that it was just what had been said to him. Okay, so as soon as I leave that police station, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did call Stanford back, and I was like, can I speak to Captain such and such or whatever? And I said I need to give my statement. Yeah, I did, like literally before I left the building, because I was like, I need to go ahead and make this report. He's like, I'll have to call you back, and he never called me back. Okay, so I'm sorry, y'all. Memory, when there's this much stuff, memory is, I'm human, so whatever. At that point, I deduced what was going on. Oh yeah, and also I saw that officer, not only he left, like I literally saw him get in his car and leave the police station. I'm pretty sure he went and drove to Stanford and talked to that officer. Either way, the information made its way back to the syndicate. I'm pretty sure he went and told him exactly what he knew. Maybe he just called him, right? But he went and told him exactly what he knew. Whatever. Because why else would he have asked those specific questions? Okay. Especially the one about where I was headed to. Because everything else could have been, well, especially about where I was headed to and about the younger officer and making sure I had not given him a statement. Those things especially told me that information was making its way back to the syndicate. Because if it had just been the license plates, okay, yeah, plausible deniability that was literally just him taking the statement. But it wasn't. It was all those three things taken together. So, as soon as I put that together, because remember, my whole goal at this time is to not be followed. Now that I know that there's 2 vehicles that followed me, I'm going to take a pause.